Greetings and well wishes from Miami in the United States. Today is the 4th day of April, and we're beginning what many believe will be the worst of all the months of this terrible, tragic situation with the virus. We extend our best wishes to all our friends and colleagues around the world. We know that the entire world is one with the pain and, in many respects, the fears that this has created, because the realities are very grim. There have been many deaths, there will be many more, and it is a time for all of us to stand as one. It is also a time where I think as countries and as people, we will be long remembered for how we conduct ourselves during these difficult hours. Speaking as American, I know we appreciate the aid and the support Russia has provided, not just to the United States, but also to Italy. And I think more than ever, as individuals in our own communities, we want to reach out and help others and recognize that these are times that bring us all together. Billionaires, people who have no money at all, we're all in it together. I'm standing as part of this discussion in a courtroom, actually in my office. It's a private courtroom. We use it for practice. Sometimes we use it for real cases. But the courtroom is empty. And that, I think, sends an image, I hope, that you can understand of how our entire court system right now is empty. Courts are open for business that they can do on papers. There have been some hearings and some proceedings by telephone, but now, bit by bit, we're starting to open up and starting to do proceedings by Zoom, by Blue Jeans, by other possibilities that are created through the technology we have today. In many ways, the closing of the courtrooms is a very serious frustration for the legal community. But it is providing extra time for some people. Some of the procedures and laws that are put in place by the court, for example, are asking for postponements of legal proceedings, we call them evictions, that remove people who cannot pay the rent. Also, with respect to mortgages, there are some programs to provide more time for people. And there are a number of government programs by our government to provide loans, payments for those who are not working. So we're hoping that some of the worst parts of the economic reality can be addressed through some of these legal steps, through some of these government actions. But in the meantime, the greatest concern of all is the threat to health and the fact that here in Florida, many people are dying, and we expect it to get worse throughout this month. Seated now in the very empty conference rooms of my office because, as is clear in the rest of the world too, there are many, many stay-at-home orders in place. In the United States, the stay-at-home orders, that's what we call them, are largely issued by the states. Our system of government is such that the true power of what we call the police power or the police authority is in the hands of the state and local governments. The federal government has plenty of power and plenty of leadership, but around the country, the so-called quarantine or stay-at-home orders had been issued largely by governors of each of the 50 states, but also in many instances by local mayors. There are a handful of states that have not yet imposed stay-at-home orders because the governors or the governments of those states don't believe the situation is sufficiently serious. The first state to issue a stay-at-home order was California. Other states have followed. Only 8 or 9 of the 50 states do not have any kind of stay-at-home orders. And Florida has a stay-at-home order that went into effect. What it means is that you stay at home, especially if you're of a certain age, especially if you have some pre-existing health conditions. And there are exceptions to the stay-at-home orders. The one that I think is gets people out on the street the most is getting to go to groceries or going to drugstores. Interesting, in the state of Florida, law firms are considered to be an essential service as long as we're providing legal work for other companies and businesses whose work and services is considered essential. So my law firm, at least technically, has remained open, at least through now, April 4th. There will be, of course, very many people working at home. And it's fascinating to think how working at home may be a big part of the future of many service industries. Law firms, accountants, even doctors are doing telemedical examinations. And so as we get through this terrible nightmare, on the other side are going to be some fascinating changes in the way we live and work and do business. And I think for many lawyers, at least, this has opened our eyes to people who work at home. For many judges, they're starting to see how these video conference features, these virtual hearing rooms with Zoom and Blue Jeans and many other facilities can work. And I also have the privilege of teaching law at a number of different law schools. We're having classes through Zoom, classes through some of the other services. And that may start to change how education is conducted increasingly. One of the questions that's come up is, do these laws, these stay-at-home orders, affect and violate our constitutional rights? And the answer is that up to now, at least, they don't, because the government, especially the state and local government, have a right to take strong measures to protect the community from serious health hazards. So quarantine laws in the United States have been considered valid for many, many years. Now, if it goes on too long, if there is limitations that are just too harsh, if they literally told you you must stay inside your home and not even go to get food or go to see the doctors, that could go too far. But so far, the stay-at-home orders have some exceptions. They seem to be reasonable, and they've been imposed largely, at least as of this time, for the month of April. And when you consider the seriousness of the health risk, the fact that people are living and functioning, the fact that the government is trying to help people, however little, however much, however fast, however slowly, with respect to financial assistance, I think any court as of now that faces a challenge to the quarantine laws or the stay-at-home orders would find that they are reasonable and necessary for the government to protect the people at this very, very difficult time.
You are.
The legal issues continue to be moving fast and sometimes in directions that we've never seen before. On April 3rd, the Attorney General of the United States directed the entirety of the Department of Justice to consider whether some prisoners facing excessive and very dangerous health concerns because of the coronavirus should be released to what we call home confinement, meaning there would be electronic monitoring, they would be in a home or an apartment somewhere. There would obviously have to be security and health conditions, but they would be out of prison, because in many instances, to leave somebody in prison who's not a violent criminal, who, for example, is in prison because of committing a fraud where no one was physically injured or endangered, keeping individuals like that in prison creates risk not only to the prison population and to the individual, but also, of course, to the police and guard authorities. So this has become a very, very serious problem, and certainly in my lifetime, I don't recall an Attorney General of the United States issuing a directive about considering the release on a significant number of cases in order to address health conditions. Of course, the Attorney General emphasized we can't put people back on the streets who will endanger the public, but nevertheless, this is a very significant issue, and my own hope is it will open up minds and the hearts of prosecutors and judges in the future to situations that raise the question, does this person really need to be in prison, even if once the coronavirus is no longer an international tragedy? Does this person need to be in prison if they can be safely kept in effect under house arrest to serve important parts of their prison term, not at the expense of the taxpayer, not at risk of further health complications, but in a home detention or house arrest where electronic monitoring with today's innovations of technology provide great assurance that this person is not going to take off. So that's important. That's a breakthrough, and all of us want to continue to follow that very, very closely. At the same time, interestingly, I'm being told that the crime rate is down because perhaps criminals are also staying at home, and it's harder to transact any kind of business now, including illegal business. But there's still a high rate of infection for police officers. So they're trying to do as much as they can to provide protection and health safety protection for police officers. But police officers, like hospital workers, tend to be among those who are most at risk. The Department of Justice, in addition to announcing this openness to considering the release of certain prisoners where the virus risks are especially serious, has announced to the prosecutors, the federal prosecutors around the country, to emphasize and prioritize crimes that result from criminals taking advantage of the virus. And two examples of those crimes are hoarding and also price gouging. But there will be many kinds of fraud that are also perpetrated. It is a crime now under the U.S. to hoard, and what that means is that certain materials that the President of the United States has designated to constitute scarce materials, if you accumulate a supply of them far more than you need for your own family, that can be a crime. And it actually could be a basis of up to a year in prison. We haven't seen significant arrests yet, but it's a strong message about hoarding, and a classic example of something that the government would not want you to hoard. Hoard again means keep a supply in your hands that is more than you need for yourself or your family. Would be masks. Obviously, the masks that are used for protecting, at least reducing the risk of virus, are very, very important. Price gouging has happened for many years, unfortunately, in this country. It began to be recognized as a crime following hurricanes, where people would sell flashlights, they'd sell small generators, they'd sell water, maybe 10 or 15 times the normal price in order to take advantage of a tragedy. And that is also a crime, and that is also going to be prosecuted in the United States in the coming days, weeks, and months. In addition to developments in the criminal law, two of the main areas to look for in terms of civil law will be recoveries, either based on claims against insurance companies, for example, for business interruption insurance. Some insurance policies that businesses have do provide for protection, payment, and coverage if you go out of business due to certain natural disasters. Now, that always depends on the specific language of the insurance policy in terms of whether a valid business interruption claim could be made. But there will be many such cases in the court, and I imagine almost every business in America has been studying closely the terms of their policy to see that they can make a valid claim. Another area that's being litigated already and actively is called force majeure, meaning when extraordinary and unexpected events happen, business obligations can be canceled simply because the assumptions of the party that were the basis of the contract have now been erased by the unforeseeable worldwide tragedy of the coronavirus. There have been some very, very stubborn attitudes by some companies. For example, some insurance companies were refusing to make payment on travel insurance claims, saying that the coronavirus was something that people could have expected or foreseen. I'm very confident that any insurance companies trying to say that people should have expected the coronavirus to come along, those insurance companies will lose. And if that's the claim and if that's the defense, those claims will be paid. Force majeure comes up in lease agreements, in contract, in many kind of agreements. And my law firm is actually litigating, just to give you an example of a case where a large hotel, very well-known hotel in Miami Beach, the Eden Rock, had a number of guests booked for the holidays that are coming up. And then, of course, once the coronavirus engulfed America and the world, the guests could no longer go. In that situation, the Eden Rock has so far at least refused to give the deposit back. We're in court about that. I have a pretty good feeling about our chances on that case, but it's tragic to even be talking about lawsuits in this context. There will be many prosecutions. There will be a huge, dramatic, and profound changes in laws and in perhaps the legal profession itself. But for all of us right now, the focus is health. People that need to be protected from the virus, people that need respirators and care urgently. So all of us here and around the world stand as one, praying that the discoveries will soon be made of the cures, that people who need the treatment will get treatment that will contain the virus and slow down the spread. And we all wish to you and all our friends and colleagues and to the people of the world, be safe, be well.